self-care. All right, so let's get started. So first of all, what comes to mind when we think about what self-compassion is? What comes to your mind? What is self-compassion or being compassionate toward oneself? What do you think are some of the barriers to feeling self-compassion? Maybe guilt, shame, feelings like that, anger even. How do people practice self-compassion? What does it look like if we were to tangibly practice it? So, we're going to look at all of those aspects of self compassion today. What it is, what comes to mind when we think about it, what barriers there could be to it, how do we practice it, what does it look like? So, first, we're going to start off with a video.
So how do I define self-compassion then? I really don't see a difference between compassion for self and others. I define them the exact same way. I argue that self-compassion has the components of a sense of kindness, care, understanding for yourself versus judgment, a sense of common humanity versus feeling isolated and cut off from others. And then a sense of mindfulness, right? Being aware of the suffering that's occurring versus over identification, which again, I'll just clarify this in one moment. Let's go through each one separately. Okay, so self kindness versus self judgment. Kindness is more than just hearts and flowers. Okay, kindness has a very active component to it. It means when you're kind to yourself, you really want to comfort yourself when you're suffering. You want to alleviate your suffering. You want to soothe yourself. Okay, it's a very active stance where I want to do whatever I can to help myself feel as good as possible in this moment. Okay. Common humanity, really framing one's own experience in light of the common human experience. It's very funny if I were to ask any of you, are you a human being? Are you a human being? Yes, of course. Is everyone else a human being? Yes, of course. Does everyone else suffer? Yes, of course. You would say that logically. But in the moment when you just blew it at work, or you had someone reject you, or something really bad happens in your life, what happens non rationally is that we get very egocentric. We feel like, why me? This somehow has happened to me. I'm the only one who's messed up. I'm the only one who's going through that difficult time. And we feel really cut off from others. It's as if somehow when things go wrong, that's abnormal. You know, this is not supposed to be this way. Something has gone wrong. But, is that the case? Has anything gone wrong? Has anything gone normal? No. That's what life is. Life goes wrong. No one in here signed a contract before you got, born in this world saying, I'll be perfect, my life would be perfect. And yet it's like, this is not the plan I signed up for. I'm pissed off about it, right? That's how we react. The problem with that, and there's a lot of problems with that, but one of the main things is when we feel isolated and cut off from others, physiologically, that's very frightening. If you think evolutionarily, one of the worst things that can happen to us is to be isolated from the group because then we aren't safe. And it's interesting, this aspect of well-being, I don't think has been studied enough. This sense of can we feel connected to others in our suffering, or do we feel isolated from others in our suffering? And just I can tell you in the workshops I've conducted, especially the 8-week ones, at the end I ask people what they got out of this the most. Almost every single person says common humanity. I realize it's not just me. It's not just me who judges myself. It's not just me who suffers like this. Very important to remember that this is human experience. This is how things are supposed to be. Okay, there's nothing has gone wrong. Yes, it's painful, but it's normal. It's natural. And then this is where the mindfulness comes in. Um, you have to be aware of your suffering in order to give it compassion. So mindfulness allows you not only to notice your suffering, but very important, we'll talk about this more, to be with your suffering as it is. We don't like to be around suffering. If we could just get rid of pain, we'd do it. And we have lots of psychological mechanisms to avoid that, again, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. So self-compassion says, wow, pain is occurring. Can I turn toward that? Can I be with that? And you actually need to do that to be able to give yourself the caring and support you need. Right. Now, some people do say, come on, you have to notice your suffering. Isn't it like blindingly obvious I'm suffering? But it's often really not. The pain caused by self-judgment, I think in some ways that's some of the worst pain all of us experience. Constant, niggly pain. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. I blew it. I'm this, I'm that. But often we're so lost in the role of self-critic, we don't really stop to realize, oh my God, this is really, really hurting. And in some ways it feels more comfortable to be the self-critic because at least the self-critic isn't the person that messed up. The self-critic knows you messed up. The part of you that feels really, vulnerable and insecure and a failure. Often we don't give that sort of side of the process as much attention. Okay. And then also very important when things go wrong in our lives, very often we go straight into problem solving mode. It's like, there's a problem. I don't want there to be a problem. Need to fix the problem, immediately. And what happens is we go straight into problem solving mode and don't stop to, again, turn towards the suffering and say, whew, this is really hard. This is difficult. I need a little care and compassion to get me through this. Then we really aren't at our best and our most psychologically stable when we go towards trying to fix that problem. Okay, so it's actually something you have to remind yourself to do before going straight into fixing problems. Just acknowledge and validate how difficult the situation is.
All right. So we just looked at the three components of self-compassion. It was an excellent video. So, what stands out to you? Is there anything really surprising or anything interesting or helpful when you're considering your own experience? So, in that video, she talked about self-kindness versus self-judgment. How too often we go to judging ourselves if something difficult happens in our lives. And the expression of being kind to oneself. We're very easy, or we might find it more easy to be kind to other people, but when it comes to being kind to ourselves, we're often our own worst critic. Um, and the common humanity versus isolation. So oftentimes when something negative happens in our lives, we go straight to, gosh, why me? Why now? Why me? Right? Rather than understanding this to be a problem that we all share naturally as human beings together as a group, right? So this is something a lot of people go through. This is something that's normal and part of the human experience rather than, an isolated experience where you might feel alone. And then mindfulness versus over identification. I thought that that was excellent as well. And being more mindful of identifying our feelings as well. So instead of going right to problem solving, as she had mentioned, taking that time to turn toward our feelings and say, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body or in my mind? And take a moment of mindfulness and be with that feeling until it passes. So, how to practice self-compassion? Can you think of any ways that you could practice self-compassion or how you would show compassion to another person, for example? So, how you would show compassion to another person might give you some ideas of how you could potentially show that compassion to yourself. We often need to practice self-compassion in situations where we find ourselves engaging in self-criticism or self-blame or judgment and punishing ourselves. It's important and very valuable to have self-compassion when we're engaging in recovery specifically around mental health and or addictions. Do people feel their best and feel most motivated when they have judgment and criticism, or when they feel supported and understood? I think certainly the latter, feeling, feeling supported and understood, certainly would motivate us, I think, to a higher degree than judging and criticizing, right? So apply that to oneself, you know. Judging and criticizing myself is less likely to motivate me to success rather than being kind, supporting myself, being compassionate toward myself, understanding, right? And moving forward from that learning. Actively practicing self-compassion and having realistic expectations of ourselves can be helpful when dealing with mental health issues. Sometimes the act of being harsh and critical toward yourself can be a part of and actually magnify mental health issues. So now we have another video on how to practice self-compassion.
First things is just to give yourself permission to treat yourself kindly. A lot of people think that it's selfish or that it involves self-pity. It's really not. Remember, self-compassion recognizes the shared human condition. It's not, well, it was me, poor me. It's, oh, life is difficult for everyone. So, and again, because it helps you give more to others, it's not selfish. So giving yourself permission to be kind, knowing that it's going to help you be happy, it's going to help others be happy. Then concrete things like noticing how you speak to yourself, asking, would I say this to a close friend? Usually not, but would I say to a close friend? Can I try treating myself that way? You can do this in letter writing. It's very effective. If you're really struggling, write yourself a letter in the same way that you would, again, what you would express to a good friend in the same situation, but write that to yourself. And then you can go back and read it. That's helpful. Probably one of the most helpful things, though, because we're mammals, we are programmed evolutionarily to respond to warmth, physical warmth, soothing touch, and gentle vocalization. When, as mammals, when we, just like think of a mommy lion and her cub, we're programmed for our bodies to calm down and to feel safe and to feel soothed. So one of the most effective ways to give yourself compassion is through some physical gesture, because you're actually tapping into that mammalian caregiving system at a physiological level. So finding some touch that feels comfortable. A really common one might be to put both hands over your heart, or maybe on your belly, or cradle your cheeks, or do something like this. Some people just holding their hand. That can let your body know that you care. And then sometimes it's easier for your mind to follow after your body has calmed down a little.
Excellent. That's a great reminder there of how important physical touch is to just being there for oneself, supporting oneself, having compassion for oneself, or consoling yourself if you're going through a difficult time, right? Holding one's hand or putting your hand on your heart or on your stomach. Maybe even saying a positive affirmation to yourself, like a positive phrase, something kind to yourself while you do that touch can actually bring your body and your mind back to a state of what we would call regulation, right? We have another video.
When I first heard about self-compassion, I was like, this is idiotic. This is so dumb. I don't think I could even grasp the concept of being compassionate towards myself in a way that would work. Like, I just didn't know how to do it. And it wasn't until I had two kids, I was completely exhausted. I was stressed out and yelling at my kids and not being the kind of mom that I wanted to be. And one day I just got the kids to bed. I was sitting in my daughter's room, leaning my back against the wall, and I was just completely distraught. I felt like a terrible mother. I was, making these mistakes and saying things to my kids that I'd never wanted to say. And I felt like beating myself up. I felt like chewing myself out and punishing myself and telling myself how bad of a mom I was. And I remember that night, I sat with my back against the wall And I just imagined giving myself a little hug and saying, "You're doing the best you can. Keep trying." And instead of being harsh with myself, I was gentle with myself. And I felt a little bit of comfort and a little bit of hope and a belief in my ability to try again tomorrow. I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little bit more loving, both toward my daughters and toward myself. I don't think it would have done them any good for me to beat myself up that night. And it certainly didn't do me any good to punish them when they were making mistakes. I mean, they were like 2 years old and 6 months old or something. So in that situation, self-compassion helped me be a better mom. First off, how do you treat yourself when you make a mistake or you fall short? Like, what do you say to yourself? Do you say things like, "I am such an idiot," or "What's the matter with me?" And we tend to be harsh or really punitive with ourselves when we make a mistake. How we respond to our shortcomings, our mistakes, our flaws, and our intense emotions is more important than if we make mistakes or if we have intense emotions. And we often treat ourselves with harshness, punishing ourselves with anger or self-hatred. And most of us do this as a habit, but berating yourself doesn't help you improve, and it can make all of us feel fearful and depressed. Would you ever talk to a friend who messed up the way you talk to yourself? Probably not. Instead of beating yourself up, we can train ourselves to respond to mistakes in a way that's courageous and helps us accept what we can't change and change what we can. In order to do this, we must practice compassion towards ourselves. Compassion and self-love are the best sources of long-term sustainable courage. And while it's easy to see that when we're interacting with others, it's often harder to apply that to ourselves. But compassion is a skill that can be practiced. So this video is a guided self-compassion exercise, a way to strengthen your ability to respond to painful emotions and experiences with love. So let's begin. First, notice that you're suffering. Instead of just ignoring your pain with a stiff upper lip, notice that you're hurting. You could say, "This hurts," or "This is stress." Maybe you made a mistake. You might feel frustrated, angry, or sad. Just take a minute to notice what that feels like. Allow yourself to sit with those feelings without judging yourself or those feelings as bad. Number two, acknowledge that pain, imperfection, and failure is a normal part of the human experience. We all mess up sometimes. Self-compassion doesn't pass judgment on those mistakes, calling them good or bad, and instead it says, "It is what it is." The reality is, sometimes I make mistakes, and that's normal. Or you could say, "That's human. Other people feel this way. I'm not alone." And number three, imagine how you would speak to a friend who is going through what you're going through. What would you say to them? Practice saying compassionate things to yourself, like, "Be patient. May I forgive myself. Keep trying. You can do hard things." Or, "I love you." It may be helpful to put your hand on your chest and feel your heart. Some people may be afraid to try self-compassion because they think that it's just an excuse for bad behavior. Or they're afraid that being compassionate toward themselves might stop them from trying to improve. But self-compassion isn't just kind, it also helps us do better the next time. Self-compassion doesn't replace or interfere with change. It's not an excuse to make more mistakes. Instead, it's the gentle forgiveness that gives us the courage to try again, even if we might fail. Self-punishment, on the other hand, makes us more fearful and perfectionistic, anxious, rigid, and closed off to trying again. Self-compassion makes us more likely to grow and do better next time. So give yourself a break. Give yourself some love so that you can build up the courage to try again next time. Thanks for trying this little exercise.
I loved how she said, self-compassion is the gentle courage to forgive yourself and do better next time. I absolutely love that. I think that self-compassion is one of the most powerful tools when we're talking about recovering from mental health and or addictions issues. I think self-compassion is absolutely a key tool and a key skill. And it might feel silly at first, to use some of those gestures, hand on heart, hand on stomach, hug oneself, to hold your own hand. But if you practice these things with time and intention and discipline, you will see the change in your life. So next we have a self-compassion affirmation meditation. I would like for you to practice this along with the video if you like, and if not, you can take a 5-minute break and return.
This is a 5-minute guided self-compassion meditation. To begin with, get in a comfortable position, either lying down or sitting. Let your gaze soften and your eyelids close, either partially or fully. And then gently shift your attention inward by taking a few deep cleansing breaths, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, and breathing out. Now allow your breath to return to its own natural rhythm and pace. You're not trying to control your breath, you're just breathing naturally here. Being mindful of the gentle rise and fall of your belly with each inhalation and exhalation of your breath. Allowing your breath to rock you and cradle you gently as if it was rocking a small child. Sometimes it's so easy to get caught up in negativity, self-criticism, and judgment. And it clouds who we really are and what's really important in life. So to help us exercise a more compassionate voice, I invite you to use some kind of soothing or compassionate touch. So that might mean placing one hand over another on top of your heart, resting your hands gently in your lap or at your side, or even embracing yourself with a warm hug. You're looking to tap into a sense of loving kindness for yourself, using whatever movement or touch feels comforting to you and supportive. And using your breath, invite love in. If it's helpful to you, you can imagine a warm light and breathing in love and self-compassion with each inhalation of your breath. Letting it fill you, letting it fill and open your heart to loving kindness, gentleness, and support for yourself for whatever it is that you're experiencing right now in this moment. Exercising self-compassion means paying attention to whatever it is that you need and allowing yourself to experience whatever it is that you're experiencing in each moment. You pay attention to your needs and you offer yourself support, loving kindness, and gentleness. And you give yourself whatever it is that you need to the best of your ability. And you do so without judgment. And remembering you can take this self-compassion with you as you continue on your journey.
All right, folks, we'll stop it there. I think that that's an excellent exercise. Any type of guided meditation, or guided visualizations, you can find any of that stuff on YouTube. It is fantastic. As you can see, even just from that moment that we shared, it does certainly relax you, and it's lovely to have, that guided meditation as opposed to kind of just sitting in silence. Some people might enjoy that piece. But for many of us, I think guided meditations are certainly successful at getting you to really feel and experience it. Okay. So now let's look at self-care. Now we talked a lot about self-compassion, what it is, what it does, how it benefits us. Now let's look at self-care. So, when we approach ourselves with self compassion, we may be more willing and able to engage in acts of self care. Okay. So, engaging in self care can be part of practicing self compassion. So, when we have a stance of kindness, care, and understanding for ourselves, we can then put it into practice by engaging in self care actions, activities, things that care for ourselves. So, self compassion may be seen as more of a state of being, where self care is more action oriented, right? So, self compassion is more being and caring for oneself. Self care is more about the actions that we take to show ourselves that we care, right? And to take care of oneself. So, a bank account metaphor or analogy. So, each day of our life, deposits and withdrawals are occurring for our emotional bank account. Sometimes the deposits and withdrawals are small, and other times they can be large. As long as the deposits outweigh the withdrawals, we are on the plus side of the account, and generally we find we're able to cope and engage in life in a healthy way. Although, even when we are on the plus side, a large withdrawal can have an impact on us. If we're in overdraft, we start to have consequences in our mental health and consequently in our physical health as well. The larger and longer that we're in overdraft, the more consequences we experience. And we can be mindful of making deposits as frequently and consistently as possible so that we're not in overdraft very often or for very long. Okay. So, what are your barriers to practicing self care? So, of course, people might talk about, family, caring for family, having kids. Oh, I'm too busy, or, I have to work a lot. I can't do, all these things at once, plus take time for myself. But it's a must do. We must take time for ourselves. And in order to fill up our cup so that we can perform well and have a good quality of life. So the next slide is going to show us another video, and it's going to explore some of the barriers, so that we can kind of think about that.
Guys, Emma here. Just wanted to let you know that this video is one segment from my much more in-depth course on coping skills and self-care. The course is on udemy.com, and there's a link in the description with a coupon code where you can get a massive discount. So if you want to learn more coping skills or ways to manage your emotions when they're really intense, check out the link in the description. Okay, back to the video. Most cars can drive for hundreds of miles without oil, but without oil as a lubricant, the engine will be wearing itself down and destroying itself with every stroke because the metal is like literally rubbing on metal. Eventually, driving without oil will destroy a car's engine. However, if you take the time to stop the car and get regular oil changes and new filters, and these filters, they remove little bits of metal and debris that can wear down the engine, the car can go for hundreds of thousands of miles. The oil lubricates the engine, preventing friction and keeping the car running smoothly. Like cars, we humans are capable of sprinting around and trying to do everything without taking breaks, But we can only last for a short while before we have a breakdown. Whether it's physical or emotional, we just aren't made to go, go, go without taking time to heal, rest, and rejuvenate. Self care is what people do for themselves to maintain health and to prevent illness. It includes taking care of your body, working through emotions, developing healthy boundaries, and taking the time to rest and heal. In the short term, self care may take more effort than coping, or it might feel uncomfortable. But self care makes things better over time. And that's because self care is about creating habits that lead to a sustainable life. In this section, you'll learn to take care of your body and mind in a way that renews your energy, resolves emotions, helps you make progress, find joy, and have better relationships with others. If self-care is so vital, why do so many people not do it? There's three main reasons. Number one, they say they don't have time for it. Number two, they think it's selfish. Or number three, they don't know how. So let's talk about the first one. I don't have time for self-care. If you think you don't have time for self-care, let me share a story with you. Once upon a time, a very strong woodcutter asked for a job with a timber merchant, and he got it. The pay was really good, and so were the work conditions. So, for these reasons, the woodcutter was determined to do his best. His boss gave him an axe and showed him the area where he was supposed to work. The first day, the woodcutter brought 18 trees. Congratulations, the boss said. Keep working. Very motivated by the boss's words, the woodcutter tried harder the next day, but he could only bring 15 trees. The third day, he tried even harder, but he could only cut 10 trees. Day after day, he was bringing less and less trees. I must be losing my strength, the woodcutter thought. He went to the boss and apologized, saying that he couldn't understand what was going on. The boss asked, "When was the last time you sharpened your axe?" Sharpen? I had no time to sharpen my axe. I've been very busy trying to cut trees. As a mom of three girls under the age of 5, I certainly understand how busy we all are and how little time each of us has. But even though I'm busy almost every minute of the day, I've learned that I have to take time for self-care or I'm just not a good mom. When I'm not taking care of myself, I'm cranky with my kids, irritable with my husband, and frustrated about my life. I may be giving them all my time, but that doesn't mean I'm being the best mom and wife I can be. I've learned that when I schedule in a couple hours every week to do something that I enjoy, like my hobby metal detecting, and when I exercise and get enough sleep and make the time for at least a couple of social interactions a week, then I'm a better mom. I enjoy being around my kids more, I have a better attitude, and I actually get more done in less time.
Yeah, interesting. So in this video, she talked a little bit about, some of the barriers are, well, I don't have time, right? Or this is selfish. Doing something for myself is selfish, or I don't know how, right? And that little story with the axe cutter was certainly really showed us really the theme, I guess, of that, right? So just try to think about the barriers to you, experiencing some self-care or putting self-care first. And, really try to sort of imagine, how you might find ways around some of those barriers to start prioritizing self-care so that you can be a better, more fuller version of yourself. So, of course, the more that you rest and take care of yourself, the more nourished you're going to feel so that you can keep showing up as the healthiest version of yourself. Self-care also allows you to maintain a healthy relationship with yourself so you can properly take care of your mental health and your well-being. And it's also important to remember that self-care looks different for everybody, right? It's about what works for you and what makes you feel good, what hobbies or things might interest you. So here we have a wonderful visual on examples for self-care. So physical, exercise and walking. Walking is an excellent way to provide self-care. A healthy diet, sleep, bath, a massage, a manicure, drinking water, all great physical examples of self-care. How do we do emotional self-care? What would emotional self-care look like? Practicing mindfulness, creating and enforcing boundaries. Boundaries is a big one. Practicing self-compassion. That is an emotional example of self-care, right? Being compassionate to ourselves. Writing in a journal, doing something creative like dance, painting, or drawing. That is emotional self-care. And listening to music. Music is one of the most powerful things we have in the world, and so many of us relate to it because it is an emotional release and a way that we can provide emotional self-care to ourselves. Social self-care, what does that look like? Meeting with friends and family, calling a supportive friend, a date night with a partner, asking for help if needed. Spiritual self-care, another interesting one. Meditation, prayer, getting out among nature, walk in nature, and we have so much of that accessible to us in Newfoundland and Labrador. Writing in a gratitude journal, and maybe attending even a worship service. Personal self-care, treating yourself, giving something to yourself that you might like or want. Trying a new hobby, like yoga, for example. Reading a book, learning a new skill, like knitting. And environmental self-care. Interesting. Cleaning and organizing your space, decluttering it, monitoring your technology time, like putting down that phone, right? And adding plants to your home, making your home more pleasing or your spaces that you're occupying more pleasing. So as you explore each of these areas, you can write down some of these ideas as to how you might like to engage in self-care in each of those areas. It'll take time to develop your own personal self-care plan, but we do encourage you to do exactly that. Develop your own personal self-care plan. What will self-care look like to you? So self-care needs to be engaged in with mindful awareness and intention. Like doing something like saying, I'm engaging in self-care now, or I'm doing my self-care now. That can help with this. That is going to increase its benefits. So, for example, a drive home from work. Your drive can happen without mindfulness, just listening to the news or being lost in thought, with no real transition between work and home. Or a person can use that time with intention and choose to listen to their favorite music or a podcast they enjoy, or just enjoy the silence and appreciate the scenery. And then the drive home helps the person to feel more refreshed and recharged. So that's mindfulness versus, non-mindfulness, just sort of driving home and kind of melting into whatever happens. That time was then used for actual self-care in a mindful way. And screen use can also be part of self-care. But that also needs to be done with mindful intention, and also awareness of how screen time can have pitfalls, like zoning out, which is not the same as mindfully choosing to watch a video or play a game for enjoyment or connection. Like playing a game can be really positive for our mental health, but if we go into kind of zoning out, like we're not really intentional about what we're doing, then the same level of self-care or enjoyment or connection can actually decrease. So screen time can also add to stress. It can add to missed time, unplanned time, specific impacts of social media can be particularly negative. And screen time can be overused at the expense of other varieties of self-care. So, while there can be some positive things that we can do with using our phones and using our computers and screen time, it's definitely important to limit that as well and be mindful when we're using it. So for physical self-care, enjoying quality sleep, staying hydrated. So even just saying, you know what, if the one thing I'm going to do today, maybe my day is really busy, but this day is the day that I'm going to have one, liter of water. And if that's the one task that you get done that day, you can feel proud of yourself, right? That was your one self-care activity. Staying hydrated, moving and building strength, scheduling well visits. Fuel yourself with healthy foods and boost your immunity. So, of course, all of these categories for self-care are important areas for your well-being, and taking care of your holistic well-being is good for your physical and your mental health. When I say holistic, I mean, mental health is more than just one thing, right? It's also our physical health, our financial health, our spiritual health. It's made up of so much, our social health and our relationships with others. So, self-care must look similarly, right? We need to find ways that we can take care of our physical health, our self-care, self-care for our spiritual self, self-care for our social, self-care for, all of those aspects, right? That creates a more well-rounded version of ourselves. So, spiritual self-care, like nature, time alone, journaling, meditation. So, there is a distinction between spirituality and religion. Some people explore and practice their spiritual life through formal religion, and other people don't. There's no right or wrong. It's about finding what works for you. Spirituality can be defined as a belief in something beyond the self. It strives to answer questions about the meaning of life, how people are connected to each other, truths about the universe, and other mysteries of human existence. So you can probably practice spiritual self-care or think about spiritual self-care in many different ways. And it's something for you folks to think about. Social self-care. It is so important for us to have connection and relationship with other people, with other human beings. We are tribal beings as humans, right? We need other people. So beyond self-care, just doing things for ourselves, self-care, it's very integral and important that social self-care is a part of it. Sometimes when we're struggling, we can easily withdraw or isolate from others, and this can then worsen the struggle further. So, social self care involves having a supportive group and a network of relationships around you of people you trust and who you can turn to when required. Having caring and supportive people around you builds a sense of belonging and connectedness, which is a fundamental aspect of being a human being. We all need a sense of belonging and connectedness, right? So, some examples could be belonging to groups outside of your work, honoring your commitments to others, asking for help when you need it, meeting new people, going walking with family and friends, going on a lunch date with friends, calling a family friend on the phone, posting positive comments on friends' social media posts, so engaging with other folks, looking through old pictures of family and friends, joining a support group, going on a date, all aspects of social self-care. Also, I would say engaging with a maybe mental health professional is an aspect of social self-care. Having a therapist or having a counselor, somebody that you might regularly see, that is still social self-care. Absolutely. So, emotional self-care ideas, learning to say no, boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, practicing gratitude, allowing yourself to let go, playing music, self-forgiveness, unplug, brain dump, which journaling, and acceptance. So, taking time just to acknowledge our feelings and our needs and mindfully engaging in practices that help us feel better. Many of the ideas here could be a session in and of themselves, like journaling, for example, and why journaling is so beneficial to us in recognizing our patterns of behavior or externalizing our thoughts and feelings and emotions and helping us to look at our thoughts and feelings in a more logical manner. So really, we could choose any of these things on this slide, and we could do a session on it in and of themselves. But, the whole point is for you to see this area of emotional self-care as one that you embrace and one that you practice mindfully with intention. It's practicing these things with intention and discipline where you will actually see the results of that and the fruits of that over time. So, personal self-care, of course, this is a fairly broad area. And it may feel like it overlaps with other areas, but it is helpful to consider these examples because maybe they don't fit under other categories. So, taking time to yourself, setting short or long-term goals, learning who you are and what you want, knowing yourself and your values. So even just Googling, folks, a list of values through Google and going down through that list of values and maybe writing down 3 to 5 that you feel are really your values or the values that you want to embody, your core values. And knowing what our values are can help us overcome many challenges in our lives and help us lead a more fulfilling life. Pursuing hobbies, budget, treating yourself, and trying new things, all aspects of personal self-care. Environmental self-care ideas. So this is a great one. This acknowledges that the spaces we're in can affect our well-being, right? So we need to create spaces around us that are comforting to us. That's part of self-care. So brightening up your workspace with plants and candles. Putting Google Maps away and exploring a new area. Airing out your home by opening the windows and letting fresh air in. Going away for the weekend to completely unplug. Book into a co-working space for a month. Maybe meet new people and network. Buy some colorful artwork and hang it up on your walls. And switch up your workspace and head to a coffee shop. So, creating your own self-care checklist. So, I encourage everybody here to think about all of the different aspects of self-care that we talked about today and start to kind of identify what some of those self-care items could look like for you. Self-care physically for yourself, self-care emotionally for yourself, self-care environmentally for yourself, all of those aspects. So, self-care socially for yourself, and choosing at least one thing, maybe a couple under each of those aspects, but at least one thing under physical self-care, emotional self-care, environmental self-care that you're going to input into your own self-care plan. Also, I want to encourage you to use SMART goals, meaning SMART goals are achievable small goals. So they're goals where we're not going to put things maybe in our self-care list that are too far out of our ability, right? We're going to choose things that are within our ability, things that we feel are measurable and achievable, things that we know that we can do, and things that are time bound, right? So things that we can do within a certain sequence of time. So we want to make sure that you don't set too many things on your self-care to-do list. We just want to make sure that the things that you do put on your list are realistic and doable so that you feel like you're actually achieving it when you do it. Be creative when you're making your self-care checklist. You can add to it, you can change it, you can do whatever you want to it. You can draw pictures or cut out images from magazines if you want to take that creative route, or paint. So definitely encouraging everybody here to do their self-care checklist and maybe put it up somewhere in your home, maybe on your mirror, maybe on your fridge, somewhere where you can see it regularly and be reminded to do some of these activities and take that holistic approach, right? The physical self-care, the emotional self-care, the social self-care, the environmental self-care. Take that approach and you can't go wrong. All right, folks, so we have resources available. We have the Mindwell U program. All these programs can be seen and are available on Bridge the Gap. We have therapy assisted online, online short programs like De-Stress Success, Adapting to Change, Understanding Depression, Evaluating Substance Use. We have our local Doorways walk-in clinics available across the province. You can find those through Bridge the Gap as well, where your local Doorways might be. We have the adult ICAN anxiety and depression programs, LifeWise, peer support, and of course, Bridge the Gap is where you'll find all of that information. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here with me today. And I hope that you have more information today on self-care and self-compassion and the importance of both of those in our lives. So think today as we exit, what is one thing that you can commit to doing in practicing self-compassion and self-care for yourself? All right, everybody. Take care, and thank you for being here.